It isn't just a personal win for him.
Wow.
It is a total disruption of the whole alpine status quo. The European Alps are usually so extremely serious and stoic, and Brazil literally just brought a giant party to the
It
mountain.
was a full-blown carnival right there at the finish line.
Okay, and speaking of brand new things to watch, we have a totally, completely new sport marked on the bingo card today. Ski mountaineering. Or skimo for short.
Skimo, yes.
So I actively watched this event on TV, and I was honestly physically exhausted just sitting still on my couch eating snacks. Can you precisely explain what is actually happening in this sport? Because to a casual viewer, it just looks like total unorganized chaos.
It is highly organized chaos. So think of it essentially as a grueling obstacle course race, but set entirely on the steep side of an alpine mountain. You start down at the bottom. You have these things called skins physically attached to the bottom of your skis. There are these long fabric strips that aggressively grip the snow so you don't slide backward. And then you literally run forcefully uphill.
You just run straight uphill while wearing skis.
Yes. Your heart rate is absolutely immediately maxed out in the red zone. Then eventually you hit a steep technical section of the mountain that is simply too steep for skis to grip. So you violently rip the skis off, strap them tightly to your backpack, and you literally run up steep stairs that have been manually kicked into the deep snow. And then you put the skis back on.
And then finally you just ski down right.
Eventually, yes. But right before you can actually ski down, you have to successfully perform what is called the transition. And this is honestly the absolute technical crux of the entire sport. It is exactly like a high-speed Formula One pit stop, but you have to do all the mechanical work yourself, and your fingers are usually completely numb and frozen.
Oh, wow. Walk us through exactly what happens during this transition phase.
All right, so you hit the top transition zone. You have to aggressively rip those grippy skins entirely off the bottom of your skis. Just rip. You frantically stuff the wet skins directly into a pouch in your speed suit. Then you have to reach down and manually unlock your ski boots, switching them from a flexible walk mode into a rigid ski mode, and forcefully lock your boots into the downhill bindings. If you fumble any part of this specific sequence, you are going to lose the race.
And this transition is exactly what happened in the dramatic women's sprint final.
It absolutely is. The heavy favor all day was Emily Harrop representing France. Physically speaking, she was by far the strongest athlete out there. She totally crushed the uphill climbing sections. She arrived at the final peak transition zone with a commanding lead.
But something went wrong.
But she fumbled the skin rip. The adhesive glue on the back of the skin maybe just stuck a little bit too hard to the cold ski. Her hands were visibly violently shaking from the pure exhaustion of the climb. She lost maybe 3 critical seconds, just frustratingly struggling to rip her gear off.
And in a sprint event, 3 seconds is basically an eternity.
Meanwhile, Marianne Fatten from Switzerland arrives at the zone. Now, she is slightly slower on the uphill running part, but her mechanical transition was just pure liquid. Unbelievably smooth. Rip, click and go. She was actively dropping into the steep descent while Harrop was still furiously fiddling with her frozen boot buckles.
Wow. It really brings to mind the military saying slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Exactly. Fatten easily passed her right there in the small transition zone and cleanly skied down to take the gold medal. Harrop had to settle for silver. It was just a picture-perfect demonstration that in the sport of skimo, you aren't merely an endurance athlete, you also have to be a flawless mechanic under extreme pressure.
I really feel like there is a profound life lesson hiding in there for literally everyone listening. It simply does not matter how incredibly fast you execute the main part of a big project if you completely fumble the final handoff at the end.
The handoff is literally everything.
Let's transition over to section 4. We have spent a lot of time talking about the raw mechanics and the brutal physics of these sports. Now let's talk about the heart, the raw emotions of it all, because we had some massive, overwhelming favorites at these games who just simply didn't show up when it counted, and their emotional reactions to that failure were deeply fascinating to watch.
The overarching theme of when favorites fail was incredibly strong in Cortina. I think the absolute biggest global shock of the games was definitely Miho Takagi over in speed skating.
Right, Japan's absolute superstar athlete.
She is the reigning world record holder in the event. She is widely considered the technician's technician, just flawless form. Literally everyone in the media, and I mean everyone, penciled her in as the absolute guaranteed lock for gold in the 1,500-meter race.
And what actually happened?
She stunningly finished in 6th place.
6th. Look, that is not just a bad race for a world record holder. That is a complete structural collapse.
It was entirely baffling to everyone watching. She crossed the finish line, glided around the turn, and stared up at the giant digital scoreboard. And the look on her face, it was just this total haunting emptiness. She said in the post-race interviews that right from the starter's gun, her legs just inexplicably felt heavy, like they were full of lead. It really speaks to that profound mystery of the human body. Sometimes, despite all the years of flawless preparation, the neural firing patterns just simply aren't there on the day you need them most.
And meanwhile, while she is processing this, who actually won the race?
Antoinette Riek-Marijong, representing the Netherlands. And the pure visual contrast on the ice was just amazing. Takagi is skating around in complete silent shock, and Riek-Marijong is just absolutely screaming at the top of her lungs. It was her very first individual Olympic gold medal. Her coach, Gerard van Velde, was literally trying to jump completely over the track barriers to get to her. It was just this pure, unfiltered emotional release.
I really do love those classic Olympic split-screen moments. One athlete's absolute worst living nightmare is occurring at the exact same time as another athlete's greatest lifelong dream coming entirely true.
And we saw a very remarkably similar dynamic play out in the figure skating rink, over in the women's singles competition.
You were talking about Kaori Sakamoto.
Yes, the Japanese favorite. She came into these games as the highly touted defending world champion. And she actually skated really well. She skated a beautifully technical routine, but she ultimately took the silver medal.
And I remember seeing the footage. She was actively crying in the kiss and cry area, and they definitely were not happy tears.
No, they were not. It was that incredibly complex, painful cry of pure frustration, because she deeply knew she had left just a tiny crack in the door open for someone else. And the specific person who boldly walked right through that cracked door was Alyssa Liu from the USA.
Now, Alyssa Liu is effectively the ultimate comeback kid of the entire 2026 games. I actually didn't even realize she had officially retired from the sport before this.
She absolutely did. She officially retired when she was only 16 years old. Can you even imagine that?
Retired at 16.
Yeah.
That is wild. That is usually the age when normal kids are just trying to get their learner's permit to drive.
She was very vocal about it at the time. She said she just wanted to live a normal teenage life. She wanted to focus on going to college, hang out at the mall with her friends, and not spend 10 hours every single day locked inside a freezing ice rink, so she bravely just walked entirely away from the sport.
But obviously the ice eventually called her back.
It did call her back. But what is critical here is that she came back with an entirely different mental framework, much less internal pressure. She specifically said she wasn't doing it to strictly please the international judges anymore. She was purely doing it because she found joy in it for herself. And you could actively see that newfound freedom in her skating. She went out there and boldly skated the absolute performance of her entire life.
And her reaction, sitting there in the kiss and cry area, waiting for the scores to drop.
Oh, it was instantly iconic. She stared up at the scoreboard, saw her massive final score pop up, and she literally turned to her coach with huge eyes and said, "Is that a 3?" She literally could not mentally process the giant number she was looking at. She genuinely thought the scoring computer had made a mistake.
Is that a 3? That is so pure. I absolutely love that.
It made her the very first American woman to win the individual figure skating gold since Sarah Hughes did it way back in 2002. It is a phenomenally massive deal for the sport.
So incredible. But on the complete flip side of all that youthful joy, we absolutely have to take a moment to mention Brittany Bowe.
Ooh, Brittany Bowe. Yeah, this one genuinely hurts to talk about.
4th place finish.
It really is the most devastating place in the entire Olympic Games. You are literally one single spot away from permanent Olympic immortality, and instead you go home with absolutely nothing but a tracksuit. Brittany Bowe is an absolute living legend of U.S. speed skating, and everyone knew this was heavily, heavily rumored to be her final Olympic race before retiring. She narrowly missed capturing the bronze medal by, I think looking at the telemetry, it was actually less than a full second.
That is just the cruelest possible way to cap off a legendary career.
It truly is. But to her credit, she handled the post-race interviews with immense grace, but you could plainly see the deep pain behind her eyes. The elite execution audit lesson there is simply brutal. Sometimes you do absolutely every single thing perfectly right, and another human being on the planet is simply 0.1 seconds faster than you on that specific day.
Let's keep moving and jump into section 5, team dynamics. And sometimes the real compelling drama actually happens long before the starter's gun even goes off.
The dreaded no-shows.
Mathilde Grimaud.
This was a genuine athletic tragedy. Mathilde is an incredibly talented Swiss snowboarder. She was the heavy betting favorite to easily take gold in the big air competition. So she is up there for the final practice run right before the actual televised final, literally the very last warm-up jump. And she crashes violently.
Oh, no, right before the final.
She hits the hard-packed snow incredibly hard. The medical report listed it as a huge, severe hip contusion. Basically, she suffered a massive, incredibly deep bone bruise that instantly locked up her entire hip joint. She couldn't even walk unassisted, let alone strap into a snowboard and land a 50-foot jump. She was forced to officially withdraw from the competition mere minutes before the contest was supposed to begin.
It is such a stark reminder that we watch these athletes and treat them like they are indestructible Formula One cars, but the delicate car they are driving is actually just their own human body. And human bodies break very easily.
They are incredibly fragile machines at the end of the day.
But let's lift the mood and talk about a team unit that actually firmly held together under immense pressure. The women's ice hockey final. The USA versus Canada.
Literally the only rivalry in the sport that really truly matters on the global stage.
It genuinely feels like these two specific teams play each other for the gold medal every single 4 years, and every single time it is an absolute brutal physical war on the ice.
It always is. And this one was heavily described in the European press as a Nachtskake finale, which basically translates to an absolutely crazy, frantic finale. So Canada was holding on to a very tight 1-0 lead. The USA was getting incredibly desperate as the clock ticked down, so they made the call to completely pull their goalie with a few minutes left in the game to desperately get an extra offensive attacker on the ice.
Extremely high risk but high reward strategy.
Exactly. But this time it completely backfired on them. Canada heavily pressured the puck and forced a sudden turnover in the neutral zone. Marie-Philippe Poulin, who the Canadian media completely accurately calls Captain Clutch, she scooped up the loose puck. She unselfishly fed a quick pass over to her teammate, and they easily scored a shorthanded goal right into the completely empty American net.
You know, giving up shorthanded goals is basically the ultimate insult in hockey. It essentially says, we currently have fewer players on the ice than you do, and we still managed to score a goal against you.
It is devastating to team morale. The USA actually managed to bravely battle back and score one late goal, but Canada solidly held on to win the game 2-1. It was honestly a complete masterclass in stoic defensive composure by the Canadian squad.
And strictly speaking of composure, or maybe the complete utter lack thereof, we absolutely have to talk about the Dutch women's speed skating pursuit team and the infamous Polonaise.
Oh boy, the Polonaise. Okay, so for full context for the listener, the Polonaise is essentially a traditional party dance. It is basically a very festive conga line.
And the Dutch skating team was aggressively doing this dance before the final race actually happened.
Allegedly, yes. The strong reports circulating around the Oval said they were so overwhelmingly confident after dominating the earlier qualification rounds that they were actually dancing, openly celebrating, essentially prematurely manifesting the gold medal backstage. They fully felt entirely untouchable.
You just absolutely never, ever taunt the sports karma gods like that.
Never. Because in the final race, they had to meet Canada. The Canadian pursuit team, specifically Blondin, Maltais, and Weidman, they were the tough defending Olympic champions. And they were absolutely dead quiet in the locker room. They were completely dialed in and hyper-focused.
I am wildly guessing they were not doing a conga line.
They were most definitely not dancing. They just stepped out onto the ice and skated a terrifyingly, technically perfect synchronized race. The Dutch team, on the other hand, perhaps just a little bit mentally distracted by their own massive media hype, totally fell apart dynamically in the very final 2 laps. Their tight drafting formation visibly broke apart. Canada surged ahead and won the gold medal.
The major life lesson here, folks, is heavily save the celebratory conga line for the actual medal plaza after the race is over.
Absolutely. Humility is frankly a highly underrated performance enhancer.
So we have extensively covered the brutal physics of the skid. We analyzed the frantic mechanics of the biathlon reload, the absolute utter heartbreak of the triple fall, and the pure chaotic joy of the Brazilian upset. I feel like we have successfully arrived at section 6 of our show, the elite execution audit.
This is exactly where we try to neatly synthesize everything we just talked about. What tangible lessons do we actually learn from studying these tiny fractions of a second that directly applies to the everyday learner currently listening to this right now?
Exactly. What are the core takeaways for normal people?
So looking at all the data, I have essentially formulated 3 main pillars for this final audit.
All right, should be with them.
Pillar number 1 is the environment check. Look closely at Zoe Sadowski-Sanat battling the endless wind delays. Look at the biathletes trying to shoot through the swirling snowstorm. The athletes who ultimately won medals were decidedly not the ones who sat around loudly complaining to the officials about the terrible conditions. They were the ones who radically accepted the chaotic reality the fastest.
Pure adaptability.
Okay.
So if your important afternoon meeting suddenly gets horribly delayed, or if the office wifey violently goes down right before a presentation, you cannot let your cortisol freely spike. You have to stubbornly stay right in your zone.
Exactly. Don't waste your energy fighting the delay. You actively manage the delay.
I love that. Okay, what is pillar 2?
Pillar 2 is actively identify your curve 9. We clearly saw with the German bobsledder Laura Nolte that a devastating 0.07-second loss wasn't due to a general lack of fitness or a broad overall failure. It was one extremely specific technical error entering one single curve on the track. So in your daily work or in your personal life, you have to ask yourself, what exactly is your personal curve 9? What is that one small, specific, recurring friction point that is quietly bleeding away all your forward momentum?
That is a genuinely fantastic question to ask yourself. Is your curve 9 your overflowing, disorganized email inbox? Is it your terrible sleep schedule? Find where you are quietly skidding every day and deliberately fix it.
Precisely. And finally, pillar 3 is the reset protocol. Think back to the German skier Vinzenz Geiger. He caught an edge and he fell. That is just a random, uncontrollable accident. But the horrifying second and third falls he took immediately after, those are actually conscious choices. They were born of pure panic.
The dreaded downward spiral.
When you inevitably stumble in life or at work, you absolutely must have a pre-planned protocol ready to stop the bleeding. Stop immediately. Take deep breath. Rationally assess the actual damage. Then and only then do you move forward. If you wildly rush the recovery phase, you simply turn a minor mistake into an absolute total disaster.
Because panic is never a valid strategy.
Panic is literally never a viable strategy.
Wow. You know, this has actually been surprisingly incredibly therapeutic today.
I completely agree. It really has been.
We started this deep dive talking about the sad post-Olympic blues, but I genuinely feel like we have comprehensively learned a whole lot today, from a Brazilian samba down the slalom course to perfect Swiss mechanical precision. From completely shattered carbon fiber poles to absolutely broken hearts. The 2026 Winter Games were incredibly messy, they were completely weird, and above all, they were deeply fundamentally human.
And that is really the true underlying beauty of it all. We eagerly tune in initially expecting to watch indestructible superhumans, but we ultimately stick around because of the raw humanity on display. We stay glued to the TV for the 41-year-old mom finally getting her gold medal after decades of trying. We stayed for the conflicted teenager who walked away from the heavy pressure and found joy again. We stay specifically for the guy who violently broke his only pole at the start line, but stubbornly kept skiing his heart out anyway.
That is so true. And it really makes you wonder, moving forward, as sports technology gets better and better, as the bobsleds get more aerodynamic and the skis get faster, whether we will eventually engineer out all that human error completely. The 0.07 seconds might just disappear. And if it does, do we even still want to watch? The imperfection is what makes it a story.
That is a fascinating thought. If nobody ever skids, is it even a race anymore?
Exactly. But on that provocative note, we are going to officially wrap up this incredibly massive deep dive. I want to sincerely thank you for expertly guiding us through all the intense stats and the wild stories today.
It was absolutely my pleasure.
And to you, the dedicated listener out there, go meticulously analyze your life and find your personal curve 9. Actively fix that skid. And whatever you do in your daily life, if you're currently winning big, just remember, do not boldly start the celebratory conga line until you actually cleanly cross the finish line.
Very, very wise words to live by.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. We will probably see you right back here in the very next deep dive.